Open a jar of Nutella and take a closer look at the label. The first ingredient isn't hazelnuts. It isn't chocolate either. It's sugar. The second ingredient, palm oil. Hazelnuts come in third, making up only 13%. Inside a 400-gram jar, you'll find roughly 200 grams of sugar and nearly 80 grams of palm oil. The ingredient that gives the product its identity barely represents 1/8 of what's actually inside. In Italy, where Nutella was first created, it legally cannot be labeled as chocolate cream because it simply doesn't contain enough cocoa. So how did a recipe that once consisted of nearly 70% hazelnuts transform into a spread made mostly of sugar? And when you pick up any jar claiming to be a hazelnut spread, what should you really be checking? The original formula looked almost nothing like modern Nutella. Back in 19th century Piedmont chocolatiers blended roasted hazelnut paste with chocolate at a ratio of approximately 70% hazelnut to 30% cocoa. They called it gianduja. That ratio wasn't designed by preference. It was created by necessity. Napoleon's trade restrictions had dramatically reduced cacao imports coming from South America. Piedmont, however, had one thing in abundance: hazelnuts. Gianduja was born out of shortage. But despite its origins, it was still genuinely a hazelnut product. Then in 1946, Pietro Ferrero introduced his own version called Pasta Gianduja, sold in solid blocks. 5 years later, in 1951, his factory developed a softer version known as Super Crema. Then came the turning point. In 1964, his son Michel reformulated the recipe for large-scale production across Europe and gave it a new name, Nutella. The name combined the English word nut with the Italian suffix ella. But something else had changed. The formula itself had begun shifting. Hazelnuts were expensive. Supply was unpredictable. Sugar was cheap, stable. Palm oil was inexpensive and kept the spread smooth at room temperature without needing hydrogenation. And every ingredient that made mass production easier slowly pushed hazelnuts further down the list. By the time Nutella appeared on shelves around the world, the original recipe, built around 70% hazelnuts, had dropped to just 13%. The name remained. The ratio didn't. Everything begins with the hazelnuts. Most of them come from Turkey's Black Sea region, responsible for producing nearly 70% of the world's total supply. Harvest season begins in August and continues into September. After harvesting, the nuts are left under the sun to dry until their moisture level falls below 6%. Then they are transported to processing facilities. Once they arrive at the plant, samples are sliced in half using a guillotine system so inspectors can examine them for mold discoloration, insect damage, and other defects. The nuts are cleaned, sorted, then roasted at temperatures around 140 degrees Celsius for approximately 20 to 30 minutes. This stage is where hazelnuts truly develop their flavor. Raw hazelnuts are fairly mild with a slightly bitter taste. Heat changes everything. The Maillard reaction begins creating interactions between proteins and sugars inside the nuts. That reaction generates hundreds of aroma compounds responsible for the rich roasted flavor people associate with hazelnuts. Too little heat and the flavor remains weak. Too much heat and bitterness quickly takes over. The margin is small. Precision matters. Once roasting is complete, the skins are removed through friction and the nuts are ground into a smooth paste. Around 50 hazelnuts eventually make their way into each 220-gram jar. But those 50 nuts account for only 13% of the jar's total weight. Everything else is built around them. Sugar dominates the recipe, representing roughly 55% of the final product. Depending on the factory, the sugar comes from either sugar beets or sugar cane. Next comes palm oil, accounting for roughly 20%. Palm oil is a semi-solid fat extracted from the fruit of African oil palms. At room temperature, it gives Nutella its stable, spreadable texture. Replace it with liquid oils and the spread separates. Replace it with butter and it becomes hard after refrigeration. Palm oil melts at approximately 33 to 39 degrees Celsius, close to body temperature. That's why Nutella feels like it instantly melts once it reaches your mouth. Ferrero uses nearly 170,000 metric tons of palm oil every year. Then comes cocoa at approximately 7.4%. The cocoa beans are roasted and processed into a reduced fat cocoa powder. After that comes skimmed milk powder, accounting for around 8.7%. These ingredients are blended with sugar, palm oil, and hazelnut paste inside large industrial conching tanks. Inside these systems, rotating blades continuously fold and mix the ingredients at carefully controlled temperatures for hours. The purpose is simple: texture. Conching reduces particle size until the mixture feels completely smooth, eliminating any graininess that could be detected on the tongue. Soy lecithin is then added as an emulsifier. Its job is to prevent fat-based and water-based ingredients from separating while the product sits on shelves for months. The final ingredient is vanillin, a synthetic vanilla flavoring compound used at less than 1/10 of 1%. The finished mixture is then filled into jars at the Alba factory in Piedmont, the largest Nutella production facility in the world. The plant produces roughly 130,000 jars every single day. For comparison, traditional gianduja typically contains around 70% hazelnut paste and about 20% chocolate. Nutella contains only 13% hazelnuts and approximately 7% cocoa. Ironically, the product carrying the word nut in its name contains less nut content than some chocolate bars filled with almonds. Every 2 tablespoons serving of Nutella contains approximately 21 grams of sugar. That's roughly 5 teaspoons, nearly the same amount as many chocolate bars. But chocolate bars are sold as candy. Nutella is presented as breakfast. Advertisements often show smiling families spreading it over toast for their children. In 2012, a class action lawsuit in the United States claimed Ferrero had misled consumers into believing Nutella was a healthy and nutritious food choice. Ferrero eventually settled the case for $3 million. The advertising changed. The product didn't. Then in 2017, Ferrero quietly adjusted the formula again. More sugar, more milk powder, less cocoa. German consumer watchdog groups noticed the change because the spread had become visibly lighter in color. Side-by-side comparisons of old and new jars quickly spread across media outlets throughout Europe. In 2015, France's ecology minister publicly encouraged consumers to stop buying Nutella as a way to help protect rainforests. Ferrero responded by stating that its palm oil usage represented only about 0.3% of global production. But the debate continued. In 2016, the European Food Safety Authority released findings showing that palm oil refined at temperatures above 200 degrees Celsius can produce glycidyl esters compounds classified as genotoxic and carcinogenic in animal studies. Italy's largest supermarket chain reacted by removing hundreds of palm oil-based products from store shelves. Ferrero maintained that its manufacturing methods kept contaminant levels safely within approved limits. Nutella remained on the shelves. No ingredient was removed. No dramatic transformation happened. The recipe that once contained around 70% hazelnuts now held more sugar than all of its other ingredients combined. So what should you actually pay attention to? The next time you pick up a jar labeled as hazelnut spread, turn it around. Read the ingredient list. Ingredients are listed by weight. That matters. If sugar appears first, then the product is primarily sugar no matter what images or promises appear on the front label. If hazelnuts appear before sugar, then you're buying a product genuinely built around hazelnuts. Nutella lists sugar first, palm oil second, hazelnuts third at 13%. That becomes your reference point. Some alternatives place hazelnuts first containing 40 to 50% hazelnuts, replacing palm oil with sunflower oil and reducing sugar by nearly half. Traditional gianduja generally contains between 60 to 70% hazelnuts. Nutella costs approximately $6 to $8 per kilogram. A spread with 40% hazelnuts often ranges from $12 to $18. Gianduja can easily exceed $30. You're not paying for the jar. You're paying for the hazelnut ratio. Nutella isn't poison. It's a confection. The issue was never truly the product itself. The issue was the way it was presented. A sugar-heavy spread was wrapped in the language of breakfast and marketed as something different. Meanwhile, the label had been revealing the truth from the beginning. The first ingredient had always been there, always visible, always listed in plain sight. A recipe that once contained nearly 70% hazelnuts eventually became a formula with only 13%. The name stayed exactly the same. The recipe continued moving further away from its origins. And through every change, the first ingredient on the label kept telling the same story. The truth never disappeared. It was sitting there the entire time. That's the process. We uncover how things really work one story at a time. If there's another process you'd like us to break down and explore, let us know. Until then, trust the process.